number one for our studio match between the Atlantis Leviathans and the Olympus Bolts. Lots of gods have kind of been fluctuating between the top picks and bans. Tiamat has always been a staple. Yamoja is one you have to ban away from the Leviathans. Raijin has been making a huge resurgence. I believe in every game we've seen this weekend, he has been either picked or banned, and when he is picked, he has been 100% win rate so far.
And Leviathans, they're going to opt early on for an Artemis ban, but J-Mag, I don't know if this is so much about the focus of trying to prevent the Bolts from having Artemis as much as it is about trying to set Shinto up for a possible Raijin pick early on. If you remember, he has still been undefeated on this Raijin. Not only that, but I'm seeing a lot of mage focus, and I'm not seeing a whole heck of a lot of ban focus towards the jungles. Osiris, well, Gilgamesh finally going to be taken out of the mix here by the Leviathans, despite their preferences for grabbing this god for beneath them. Seems as though they'd rather shift their focus elsewhere, and could be a frontline establishment here out of the Leviathans early on, given the fact that Bolts, they're onto the Leviathans entirely. They're not going to let Shinto have Raijin.
And is it really any surprise that we're seeing so many mage bans? Not just because we have a ton of strong mid laners within the league, but the top end of the mages are so far and above what we've even seen in previous seasons, previous splits. Doesn't matter. This has been the season for mages. This has been the phase for mages because of these Tiamats, when Morgan Le Fay was one of the big picks, and now she's kind of fallen to the wayside a bit and it's been replaced by Raijin and Giannis as some of the top ones. But as our first bans come through as three mages, we highlighted the Giannis, Raijin, and Tiamat, as well as Yamoja, Gilgamesh, and an Artemis all banned away. And the first picks coming through, Osiris as a top pick for the Leviathans. Meanwhile, the Bolts, they'll take Fafnir.
But J-Mac Odin, he's still up for grabs, and it doesn't seem as the Bolts are really all that concerned with establishing him as a pick early on. I can't really blame him. With the Osiris already locked in here, Leviathans, if they were to opt for an Odin, A, I don't think it'd really be all that ideal up against the likes of Fafnir, Cerberus. B, it just seems very physical dependent at that point out of the Leviathans draft. But this Terra lock-in from the Leviathans could possibly persuade the Bolts to consider looking in that Odin's direction.
In that case, that would have to be maybe an Odin out of the jungle in that instance if they want to go for it, as they have locked in two frontliners, the Fafnir and the Cerberus. And Cerberus, not likely going to go anywhere but one of those two side lanes. Seeing him out of the jungle would be a little bit silly, nonetheless, for it. But making sure to draft frontline early for both of these teams.
Hey, you can't sleep on Cerberus jungle, though.
I can sleep on it because I've never seen it, and I don't think it would be very good. Now, somebody will probably, if you do have a good Cerberus jungle game, maybe you throw an app towards me on Twitter or something like that and call me out for it. But so far, I haven't seen it, so I'm not banking any on it at all. But Osiris and Terra and Morgan Le Fay will be locked in hero for the Leviathans, making sure to get their mid laner before the second round of bans come through.
As much as I like playing devil's advocate, I do have to agree. Very unlikely that we see a Cerberus jungle by any stretch of the imagination here. Terra, Morgan Le Fay, on the other hand, with those having been locked in, not only is there strong team sustain, I like the counter initiation that Earth and Fury is going to introduce. You also have the counter initiation off of Morgan Le Fay's kit in general because of that fear and the knockup. But with the Hell, Cleanse incredibly strong against such a low crowd control composition so far out of this top three from the Leviathans. And now Bolts get their opportunity to immediately take Odin out of the game. On top of that, if they wish to take that Circuit, then they could definitely entertain the notion unless the Leviathans are willing to invest a couple of bans Lasbra's way.
There's an option available for it, and as the picks and as the second round of bans come through for it, Odin will be something that the Bolts are a little bit worried about now because they have that Hell locked in for themselves. With the Cerberus and the Fafnir, they can get out of the Hell or out of the Odin cage, no problem. Hell, a little bit trickier for it. Has to use those basics or invest a Phantom in order to get out. So a wise ban for him, and taking Kukulkan away from Harkora as well. That's been one of his staple go-to solo lane picks. Has a little bit of an 8 anti-heal into his kit as well, so make sure to take that off the board.
It doesn't seem as though the Bolts had any intentions of believing that Osiris was a guaranteed lock-in for the solo lane. It's often that we see the Osiris being flexed between jungle and solo, but in the Leviathan's case here today, they're going to be a little bit more pressured if they want to take this Osiris into the jungle, because right now, as far as Harkora is concerned, King Arthur is still potentially up for grabs, but I think it's going to be the RDO, and this is an interesting one. I have to remember RDO on the back now of the most recent updates, her movement speed shifting from 75% to 100% whenever she opts for that bear charge form. So a little bit more capabilities, I think, of actually charging into the back line here from the Bolts. The lockdown certainly could be strong, but I really like this Erlong Shen here for the Olympus Bolts. I think that there's so much early game aggression out of this current Bolts draft.
Grab the Old Faithful with the Heimdall for Zapman, but with Artio and Terra locked in now, it kind of bodes the question of which of these two Guardians is going to the support role, because Neil plays the Artio a ton in support, and that's, I believe, where also Aurora played it for a short time period as well. But we've also seen Artio played in solo lane. That was back during the King Arthur's Rising meta, and that was kind of one of the answers to deal with King Arthur. We've also seen Terra flex between those two roles, so if you're this Leviathans team, where are you sticking each of these Guardians?
I think that it would be best for Leviathans to have that Terra for Rongyu. I think that he's just got a smidge better of a Terra than Yarkor, but if they wind up with a Terra in the solo lane, I don't think that that's anything for the Leviathans to really feel all that pressed about, because Artio would have a lot of those early game assets, and the Kerple field, I think, could also be very impactful in terms of just deterring Lasbra from trying to play as aggressively into the dual lane. Oftentimes, we see the Erlong Shens looking for those early ganks into duo, especially against the likes of a Heimdall. Even with that Bifrost, still fairly susceptible to having those beads burned out, especially when he's trying to deal with Fafnir and an Erlong Shen. And Barracuda looks as though he wants a noble steed of his own. He'll take the Hachiman.
Game number 1 in the studio. Dulcin and Aggro, take it away.
In we go to the Atlantis Leviathans versus the Olympus Bolts. And what a matchup we've got back in the studio. Not only is this a top 4 matchup, so that's fantastic, but there's also some seeding implications on the line. If the Olympus Bolts win this one, Aggro, they're guaranteed top 2. If the Leviathans win this set, they keep their hopes alive for top 2. And so, very important considering the first round bye in the Phase 2 playoffs.
Put more threat on the Fire Giant. The big difference being that you don't have to all-in commit with Bracer like you do with something like that.
This is pretty expected, I think, from Awesome Jake, and Barracuda in behind to follow up. You're going to put some pressure onto Zapman and force this Heimdall back just a little bit early on. Hachiman for Barracuda here, not all that surprising. I think this is one of those picks that he tends to really enjoy, but Lasbra gonna make things awkward for Shinto. It's the blink through, the pin is there, and first blood to the Bolts 2 minutes in. But Haddix getting ganked over in solo. An immediate return kill from the Leviathans.
Unfortunate timing for the Leviathans that Shinto ends up falling first, but I love that patience coming in. It's not even that feels really good on your power curve, because the tier 2 in the Cursed Orb feels pretty solid to buy. You don't feel like you're sitting on something fairly weak. As Ven in trouble, because Panatom has damage early.
And luckily for Ven, he's able to get back beneath his tier 2, and Haddix secures the blue buff. But look at the grouping from the Leviathans on right.
Just trying to keep that pressure up once they got that 1 kill, and now Panatom right back on speed, and Lasbra nowhere close. So there's back-to-back speed buffs.
Oh, nice.
Cancel that. Venenu, world's best teammate, secures the speed buff for Lasbra, which he's going to be very thankful for at all, and players are going to be landing it consistently, so he just slams you. And we saw it from Solar Patrol in the last set.
Yarkor takes the Stygian Torment, but gets on out of it. So Haddix now doesn't have that ultimate. And hey, Panatom, right side pressure. He's here again. Lasbra 1 level down to try to assist on the blue buff. Zapman has to use his beads in the Bifrost, and so Zapman will survive. Can you say the same about Yarkor? No, you can't, because Lasbra's picked up the kill, and now Panatom sent the other direction. That's always the threat, isn't it? When you telegraph where you're putting this pressure, if you're going to the blue buff on cooldown, the Bolts are going to know.
And the Bolts end up winning both sides of that engagement, doing the actual pacing of the game, who's forcing the enemy team to respond to them. And so far it's been the Leviathans, but the Bolts have answered.
Yeah, wow, and then there's going to be a coerce spread across the team here, and look at where the Leviathans are on the map. Nowhere close by, and so it's an 8-minute Gold Fury going to the Olympus Bolts, and that's going to build up this gold lead just a little bit further. It was about 1,000. Grows further now. Venenu might have a stun on the other side of this. Will use the beads, and so it doesn't take much damage, but as far as the utility goes, now doesn't have one of those relics. So
beads there from Ven, maybe expecting a Lord of the Afterlife, but you hope you're going to be able to just react to that sound cue. Ends up losing the beads, but that hurts hell less than most other characters.
That's true. Can cleanse things on out. He can. Haddix uses Stygian Torment. Once again, Lasbra's taunted in a couple. Haddix has got to be an afterthought here, but he's healing up plenty. Panatom has got a kill. Nonetheless, onto Lasbra. Now Haddix is going to get chased down by Shinto and Panatom, and it's a double for the Osiris. What a way to turn around an earlier dropped kill by that blue buff. Panatom's already got 3 and a blue buff.
Terra are 2 gods that I'm scared of as a mid laner, because they actually threaten me in the team fight. I have to use relics against those gods or else they're going to do too much damage. They won't outright kill me maybe, but I certainly can't fight after I tussle with them. Something like Genji's is going to work well here for Venenu. It's more MP5, which is something that Hell always needs. Cooldown reduction, a little bit of HP, a lot of magical protection, and then a great passive for Hell, just taking flat cooldown, seconds off of her cooldown. So I love the build.
Man, this right side of the map has just felt oppressive for the Leviathans against the Bolts. Haddix has just not been able to step up in lane, has constantly been half HP against Yarkor here. Bracer gets dropped down. Yarkor in on the chase, gets pinned by Lasbra. But Panatom is in, still has his ultimate if he wants to close that gap, and close that gap he does. Haddix throws his ult out as well and pulls back a couple, and Venenu detonates the damage from the backline. But Yarkor's able to turn one back here. Lasbra in on the chase, does not have his ultimate, but does have the pin. And that's rooted wrong you in place, but there's way too much healing, and look at the disengage from Shinto. No more kills flowing through just yet, but Yarkor's still chasing down.
Ven half HP, feel like he's got to be able to get away from this because of that extra protection from the Genji's guard. And it ends up being 1-for-1 Haddix for Panatom. Like, man, I wish I could have gotten 3 stacks on my rage from that. That would have felt really good. So he ends up finishing it off instead. I think it's fine. It also ups their objective DPS, which we were just talking about.
Wow, Jake transforms here. One less relic for Jake than what Rongyu has. The Ankh for Rongyu could make a difference here in this fight. Stun onto Rongyu. Takes a little bit of damage, but Jake has taken way more. Lord of the Afterlife is huge from Panatom, and Shinto's got the range, and Lasbra's around the backside, but he's all alone. He has to transform to get out of this fight, and I'm sure he'll be safe and sound. Maybe not, though. Taunt used. Panatom closes the gap. And that's on me for not assuming an Osiris will chase him down.
Man, Panatom is playing so well right now. Been a part of every kill for the Leviathans, and in that fight, Lord of the Afterlife pure anti-heal is huge.
Yarkor re-engages onto Haddix here, receives some healing from Venenu. Primal Fury down to half HP. Now Barracuda looked at, has to dash away, and will use the ultimate as well. So Barracuda survives, but at what cost? You have to assume a Primal Fury is going to go down here at some point, unless the Olympus Bolts want to poke their head back around that corner. Some sustain from this Terra might make things interesting, but instead the Leviathan's thinking twice.
This Hell sustain starting to become problematic already, and this is a big difference in the way that the sustain worked for these two teams. I was talking earlier about Artio and Terra. Go over. You know, that's the real fear. So you always bid low in those situations.
Yeah, it works out. Zapman gets the 2 instead of the 3, and already a couple of crits. I can't remember if we determined Zap has great or poor crit luck. I forget which one we determined when we were doing the Hunter roll queue there, but it's one or the other. But this game looks like he's going to maybe have some pretty good luck. The Olympus Bolts trying to force this Primal Fury again. I don't know how forced it is. They do it quickly, and the Leviathans weren't close enough by. Rongyu has dropped the ultimate here. Can Zapman chase down Jake? No crits just yet, but Panatom will help Zapman out and finishes off the kill. Now Haddix has to leap away as well, but Shinto's got the range damage with that Morgan Le Fay ultimate. Barracuda gets stunned on through, uses his beads, has his own ultimate to disengage, but it looks like the Leviathans are going tower diving.
Good cleanse from Ven. Make sure that that multi-man root doesn't end up spelling doom for more members. And it's a 2-for-0, but the Bolts get the Fury, but I like the Leviathan's position coming out of that fight. Haddix continues to just get focused down. That's 2 Fury fights in a row that Jake jumps in. Because again, Lasbra's anti-heal is very ineffective on this Erlong Shen. It's hitting one person with those auto attacks with the Toxic Blade. All of your anti-heal is on this Cerberus, so if he continues to get picked off in these fights, it's bad.
Is this an FG call for the Olympus Bolts? They've got Coerce, they've got Frenzy. This is a very Jade Dragons-esque play. Let's get the Fafnir, let's get Frenzy, and let's burn down a target. Right now that target is Yarkor, but it took him a while to get that kill, and look at the health bars of everyone on the Olympus Bolts. Has Yarkor bought enough time? The answer is no for now. The Olympus Bolts, though, with a gutsy call. They made that call, didn't they? A couple times around the Fury. Yeah. Now they're making it around this FG, but they've got no Frenzy. They still do have that grouped up Coerce when it comes back up, but Haddix has got to be careful. He's pretty far forward.
Oh, stun just misses on the Zapman, who does a good job of peeling away, but a good fear coming from Shinto. Jake, where'd you go, buddy?
Jake locked down and taken down, and it's Shinto on the board yet again. 3 kills in the back pocket of this Morgan Le Fay. I saw some crits in there for Zapman, by the way. He's got Wind Demon on the back end of a fully stacked Rage. So the Olympus Bolts come away initially, though you spend a lot. You spend Jake's ult, you spend the Frenzy. You come away with a good advantage, getting a kill onto Yarkor. And maybe overstay just a little bit, or Jake gets a little overzealous and ends up getting taken down. That's a lot of damage onto Shinto, who does not have beads, and Venenu pops him in the mid lane, and so the Bolts find another advantage. 5 or so K gold in the lead. They were 3 or so thousand ahead. And so now we've seen this game plan aggro from the Bolts, where if they feel like they've got this small gap like this to push an advantage around one of these objectives, they're going to take it. Jake transforms, spreads out the Coerce. Panatom is alone around the backside, but the rest of the Leviathans closing that gap. FG is low, and the Bolts secure it. Wrong you drops his Ankh, but is it doing enough? Yes, it is, because the first kill goes to the Leviathans, but not before Barracuda trades back, but Zapman joins the fight, and he's got big damage on in. The Olympus Bolts get the FG, but it's going to be the Deicide on the other side. Panatom has 2, Zapman has 2, and the Leviathans get all 5.
Yeah, that's Mr. Two-Time to you, back-to-back, and now 2-0-8 for Zapman, who simply strolls in and says, thanks for all the space, fellas, I'll be doing the killing here, and steps up and just starts slamming the Bolts with auto attacks. And the Bolts, they're incentivized to group. They're playing a hell composition. They want to be stacked on top of one another, gain these hell heals. But you called it, Dave, that Ankh from Rongyu was massive. That made it sure that no one was healthy enough to really withstand Zapman's psychotic onslaught onto the Bolts. Can the Leviathans just walk in and end?
No,
I guess not. Yeah, they had the wave. I was thinking maybe just Lasbra and Jake
Just
going in there and getting your hands dirty the old-fashioned way. No Fire Giant buff. So if the Leviathans are emboldened enough to go for this left side Phoenix, it is not as easy as one might think. And I think that's why they're making this call. Just get the tier 2 back up. Nowhere near enough damage in this game. And that's one of the weaknesses of a comp like this if you're the Bolts, is that your backline dive is really centered around this Erlong Shen and Cerberus. And when they've both been fairly behind this game, I mean, look at where Lasbra is in the player damage. She doesn't even. It's been a big difference in that department.
Lasbra's just on the left side of the map here. At least halfway on the left side of the map. He'll take the red buff. Feel like we've seen this with Erlong Shen, not even Lasbra specifically, but in games like this where you really need to get into that backline, find these engages, sometimes it spirals and you don't have a great target. I don't know who's that, or I don't know who Lasbra wants to taunt in. He's going to have to figure it out quickly, though, because Haddock's getting melted away. Yarkor walks forward with the help of Rongyu. Lasbra and Panatom dueling on the left. Zapman is connected onto one with his ultimate, and it's awesome Jake that'll come crashing back down to earth, and luckily he's able to leap away as Coerce spreads itself out across the rest of the Olympus Bolts. Panatom works his way in. 3 ultimates down for the Leviathans, only 1 down for the Olympus Bolts, so maybe an advantage there around the FG.
Ben lost his beads, but other than that, I'm feeling really good about that last fight if I'm the Bolts.
Just constantly falling back in these engagements, and so maybe it's Lasbra who's got to find something a little bit different, or maybe we run back the same play that we have been running so far. Jake transforms, has the frenzy. Rongyu is close by. The answer from the Leviathans is quick. Zapman's all the way on the left side of the map, though, is enhanced Fire Giant being taken down slowly. This is a low-numbered fight for the Leviathans, and they're still putting pressure on the Olympus Bolts. Barracuda has taken a whole lot of damage here, and Yarkor's going to try to chase him down. And it looks like Barracuda's going to use his ultimate to get on out. But look at the damage from Shinto this time. The carry's getting it done. The Olympus Bolts in a constant state of backpedal. Venenu's going to be the last to go down, and the Leviathans sweep through game 1.
Man, that front line from the Leviathans was relentless on that dive. Panatom straight into the back line, right on top of Barra. Then Yarkor charges through literally 4 people. I don't think I've ever seen an RDO dash go through that many people and not get interrupted, and still is able to put pressure on Barra after that. Just a beautiful team effort from the Leviathans. Panatom's aggression throughout every stage of the game ends up 7-1 or 8-1, I think, on that Osiris in the jungle.
And actually, I think there was a clean wipe entirely, and I like the premise behind what the Olympus Bolts had drafted. I think that the Erlong Shen definitely worked out pretty well in terms of just being able to kind of contrast against this Osiris early game pressure, but ultimately where it really fell apart here was Yarkor on this RDO. That was an absolute devastation for the Bolts when they finished securing that Fire Giant, only to be immediately annihilated after the fact.
And then what was that one team fight right at the end where they're trying to siege the Fire Giant, and then they have to walk away because all of the Leviathans show up, and then Hardcore got, what was that, a 4-man bear charge through? And how often do you get to see an RDO run through 4 players uninterrupted?
Just RDO charging through. These Olympus Bolts were there, a bunch of gabagool, you know what I mean? They just did not really stand a chance when the Leviathans were prepared for that full-on collapse. And I think more importantly, it was just those buffs to the RDO. I mean, How do you stop a bear charging you with the 100% movement speed? I think that was a prime example of some of the benefits that this bear actually has to bring to the table.
Even with the bolts grabbing it, and then the immediate one at the very end of the game where they chased the bolts off and then were able to just run it down the right side of the map, which they cleared. And after that one Fire Giant wipe, that was, what was that, 3 towers they took away and a Phoenix all in the process, even splitting their efforts for it. But picks and bans for game number 2 here for Leviathans are taking the second pick route this time because the bolts elected to take first pick, and the first thing they're taking off the board is going to be Raijin.
It's pretty funny, though, these teams. They both have the yellow and blue color schemes.
It is kind of nice.
So it looks clean. I'm not going to lie. Look at all that inside apparel.
Okay, here's my one qualm with it, though, is like, okay, so I know, like, the main logo itself is the yellow for the bolt, so we see it here, and then the blue, Leviathan itself for there, but it's like their backgrounds are opposite colors of what it is showing here, so it kind of throws you off a little bit.
The bolt's yellow, though, is it's more of that mustard. Meanwhile, actually, I think Leviathans might have a little bit more of the mustard. Bolts,
yeah, they got more of like the
bolts
true
like that
yellow.
Honey mustard, kind of.
Something a little bit closer for that one. But with the bans coming through, Raijin is highlighted before. Tiamat and Terra going to be the next ones taken away, as Terra has proved to be just a little bit too much to deal with out of Rongu, piloting that support for them. Ardio, is that a discussion for something you may need to ban away just because of how well it performed, or is that something where they threw it out there and maybe you take the risk on it?
Don't think you need to ban it if you could possibly just look to take it for yourself. I don't think it's outside the realm possibilities to look towards prioritizing an RDO, but the Bolts, they'd rather not. They'd figure, hey, if we feel as but it's obvious, though, the RDO was definitely problematic, and I think it was most obvious, especially when the Leviathans were just chasing the Bolts down, both at the Fire Giant and then the Enhanced Fire Giant pit. It was basically just a very big problem to get away from the bear there. And not only that, they're also going to take away the Osiris from beneath them. They're going to force the Leviathans to switch it up entirely, because last game I think that Leviathans definitely built the core of their draft surrounding this Osiris and their front line, but if they want to establish that front line early on, it's going to come all the way of Fafnir, and this has been such a heavily contested pick, I think, for Leviathans and Bolts in general in all their past sets.
Yeah, this is a top 3 for both of these players. Specifically, Rongu has had 5 of his last 6 games before this set. As I had to bring it up earlier on, he's 5-0 in his last 5 performances with this factor, and him getting it here could be a bit dangerous for the Bolts. But the Bolts have effectively stripped 3 gods away from them. They banned away the Terran Ardio, and now they've taken the Osiris, so that's going to be a 3/5 draft that has to change for the Leviathans, and their first options to change will be out of 2 of those 3 roles, with the Fafnir and the Gilgamesh, but now the Bolts picking up Osiris and Fenrir. A lot of flexibility between these 2 gods.
Definitely some flexibility, but more importantly, they're gods that can definitely get out of the winds of Shamash. I think that one of the reasons why Gilgamesh is so heavily favored is because of that root and slow that he introduces for a team-fighting environment. Factor that in with the Fafnir, who's, when he's undergoing that Draconic transformation, also going to be applying a little bit of a slow and some dot damage to boot if you stay inside of it, which the likes of Artemis could have some issues getting away from. I think the intention here right now from this Bolt's top 3 is we're not trying to let our Artemis get collapsed on. We're looking to be the initiators, get the kills first, so that the Leviathans don't have any opportunities to try and turn on this art.
Hark the Shark will grab his signature Cucullin for the solo lane, which means that we'll be pushing that Gilgamesh towards the jungle. The Leviathans aren't fully convinced where this Fenrir is going just yet. We did see Jake play it in a previous set, so they're going to take at least one shot at Lasbra to make sure to take the Serket away, and I like this. His performance against the Dragons Game 3 specifically with this Serket was one of the better performances from Serket we have seen as of recent, able to even catch a Pele out of her own ultimate. It's not something that you can just do all willy-nilly. You got to have some really good, insane timing to be able to do so. But along with the Serket, we see the Morgan taken away, making sure to take a shot at the mid laner. We're at the flip side for it. The Bolts, they're going to ban away the health that they had last game, and they're going to take a shot at Zapman and ban a Time Doll.
But don't think it hurts Shinto all that much. If he really wanted to, he could just look to run it back on the Morgan Le Fay. And right now, though, seems as if the prioritization is going to be on this Chernabog. Zapman looking to have some of that global impact, and when you have a frontline like Gilgamesh, Cucullin, and Fafnir, this could be incredibly problematic. Also, really like Chernabog for his range damage output up against the likes of this Artemis. Have to remember, Crystallized Curses, Vicious Barrage, that's a freebie route, a potential freebie for pulling purification beads away from that Artemis, not to mention Into Darkness can evade a lot of the current dive damage that the Bolts have opted for, and just basically buy time here for Zap to wait for the troops to back him up.
And that Crystallized Curses is, it's not a small area either. You can cover an entire zone of a jungle with just that single ability, and you always got to wonder in the back of your mind, is he going to break it himself? Do I have time to walk through this? Do I just need to wait for it to go off on its own? It brings a lot of mind games to it and kind of clutters up the comms a little bit. But the Leviathans, they'll like to make sure that Shinso has final pick to go for a counter option against the Bolts. So now it comes down to what do they want for their mid lane, and we still don't know exactly where this Osiris and Fenrir are going. If this is going to be Fenrir support, if it's going to be Fenrir jungle, well, still not going to get that question answered just yet. It will be a Merlin for their first pick, but with all these questions still up in the air, the final pick for the Bolts is going to be a big one.
And that's the thing here, J-Mac, is that I'm definitely noticing so much frontline, so much beefiness out of this Leviathans roster. I definitely think that Artemis and Merlin are certainly two gods that can cut through a front line, such as what the Leviathans have opted for, but really like seeing this Cerberus to kind of round things out for them. Ghastly Breath going to be critical here, I believe, for stripping away even more of those protections, really trying to look for that heavy setup factor for the Merlin especially. I think that this is going to be an all eyes on Venenu game, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's still all eyes on Venenu, because based off how game one went, Leviathans were not trying to let him do anything on the Hell, and I'm definitely expecting them to keep the pressure going with him on Merlin.
While they weren't able to get a ton of kills against Venenu, they were effectively able to keep him out of fights, keep his healing down.
Bolts, and by the end of things there wasn't much of a leg to stand on.
Look, whenever you're Shinso or Zap and your front line was creating as much space as the Leviathans were in game one, you've got to be thinking to yourself, nothing can go wrong now. This should be free.
And here's the problem. In that last fight, Barracuda felt like a sitting duck. He was sitting in the back, got jumped on by Panatom, got one shot. We didn't even need an FG. Barracuda was just dead, and then they ran things down.
Well, this time around, we'll see if the Bolts are going to be feeling better than Hazer and Adapting are right now. I think the odds are in my favor betting with Jake in this game, but I think that he's going to have to really step it up overall in this one.
Yep, the ability to jump in and then set up and then have some follow-up is there. But then this can happen if you don't get the damage with a kill quick enough. Oh no, we've been gassing him up, and the Leviathans put him right back down. Zapman for first blood.
Zap leverage this early lead, get involved in some fights around mid. Merlin is a character that, the exact type of character I'm looking for if I think this might be a good Chernabog game.
Yep.
The two things that make me want to pick Chernabog are that his safety is going to be big for me, or that there's an immobile mage I can kill.
Purple buff invade for Jake and Barracuda, but Jake
bring
left
him in.
alone. Ragnarok for the CC immunity, but he sent Wrong You a little bit further back. Jake leaps away, but followed up on by Panatom, and Zapman will use the ult. The Winds of Shamash seal the deal here, and it's another kill on the board for the Leviathans. And it's what Fenrir wants to do. He's just been, and that's something the Bolts have to be wary of, is this immediate objective start and lockdown if Wrong You is close enough by.
Even with just that Bracer of Radiance, like that'll be a difference maker on that for sure. And already, the team's starting up that Gold Fury, but it's the Bolts again. Similar to game one, they just have Cryo on this side of the map, and they'll get this one without a contest whatsoever from the Leviathans.
Man, that feels great.
Yeah.
Man, the Leviathans, they're going to start up this objective really quickly here, and the Bolts a gold lead in general. With the way that this game has gone, definitely interesting. And it's not a small one. It's about 1,000 gold on the back end of that Gold Fury, and will get bigger if this Pyromancer is also secure. Can Yarkor steal it away? No, he can't. And the Bolts take down the Pyromancer, but it's a good ult from the mid lane from Shinto onto Haddix, who uses the Stygian Torment to get out of that grasp of death. Venenu has to flicker away, but you don't go all that far with that one. And Panatom and Yarkor with the 1-2 punch take down the Bolts mid laner. Awesome. Jake, he'll fall in tow.
Nice hammer onto Haddix, but he does have that leap up right on time. Just Venenu in particular did not get the memo of how that fight was going. That, hey, we used a little bit in order to get that objective. We know that there are going to be people coming. We got to get out of dodge. But Ven kind of backpedaling, takes a bunch of damage from the flowers coming from Persephone in the last game, where the Bolts get the Fire Giant, then get decided right after the fact. That's been the play.
Venenu drop kicked against the wall without beads, and a grasp of death says thank you very much. Panatom on the board for a third time this game. This guy ate his Wheaties or something here today, because this jungler for the Atlantis Leviathans is just running things.
You have to write your articles and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Who chooses that?
them. They have all the, they're
Seems
the
arbitrary.
I agree. I don't understand who put them in power, man, but I found it annoying.
Awesome Jake, now a chance to get his team on the board. It's a Ragnarok on Arangu, immediately followed up by the boar, and Barracuda finds the first kill of the game for the Olympus Bolts. And right on time, the Fury is up. It's a one-man advantage on the left side of the map for the Olympus Bolts. The Leviathans are close by. See if they can steal it away.
Primal down to half, and that Merlin burn is coming in, but the Leviathan's not giving it up without a fight.
It's a slight reset from the Olympus Bolts. In the back goes Yarkor, but it's not in time to steal away the Fury. Barracuda dunked on, though,
Goodbye, Ben.
by Panatom. Venenu chased down by Zapman and Yarkor, but Barracuda starting to swing here, and this one nearly gets the kill on the Zap, who had to use his Aegis. He'll get chased down as Lasbra climbs those damage charts. Yarkor, the last one around. This is going to be a deicide plus a Fury for the Bolts.
What a play from the Olympus Bolts, just brute forcing their way into an objective and a team fight win. They get that pick on the left-hand side, and they just immediately head on over.
Right? Available to you. Lasbra now higher up on the damage charts. Played a big role in that fight. Was it, 800? Now is at 3,100. So is able to find 2,000 plus damage in that last fight, but it's really Barracuda who skyrockets things up. Lasbra in onto Zapman here, who uses his ultimate. So Zap either drops back down or somewhere in the mid lane, and back down it is. Lasbra's alone here. Around the backside is Panatom, and Zapman bought enough time. There's a stun around the corner. Zapman has beads if need be, but he does not need them. Panatom closes that gap. So no kill on the left side of the map, but there might be one in mid, and the perfect target, Rangyu, gets pulled back into the fray, and Barracuda's now got his third.
Maybe it wasn't Jake. Maybe it was the Fafnir all along, Dave, because Fafnir players have been struggling so far in this set. Another kill on Rangyu to kick off an engagement. And just like last time, Bolts, no fear, baby. Full speed ahead towards the Fire Giant. This time the Leviathans have learned their lesson. They do not step up in the disadvantageous fight. Bolts all of a sudden have complete control.
Complete control. And the target selection from Jake has been pretty simple. Let's Ragnarok Rangyu, who doesn't have beads. In my team, I have enough faith that they'll be able to burn him down quick enough where he can't get down, can't transform, things like that on the other end of my ultimate. And that one-person advantage has been more than enough for the Olympus Bolts. So, again, credit where it's due to Jake. It was an 0-3 start. That's now 2-3-2. Since going 0-3, he's gotten 2 kills and 2 assists, and the Olympus Bolts have completely turned this game around. There's a Draugr buff for the Leviathans, and they're going to need to make use of it. Right side Phoenix was being sieged. Still lots of towers on this map for the Bolts to take.
Staying grouped and fighting is fine.
It'll at least be a tier 1 tower on right. Lasbra is there with 3 members of the Leviathans, now 2, so Laz might be able to stop some of the backs there as the tier 2 tower crumbles on left. The chase goes on, but Zapman will head on back to base. Had the ultimate if need be. Panatom uses the blink, but Lasbra does as well. Now there's a jump in under the left side. Phoenix, the Arcor, Salmon leaps forward as Haddix uses his ultimate to pull one back. Boar is out from Barracuda, stunned to 3. Zapman, the only one who doesn't take one on the other side of things, but Zapman's got the damage onto Barracuda, and this siege has been sent back.
Here comes Zapman looking for Ven. Both relics expended, and the flicker. Looks like Ven's going to be safe, as will the rest of the Bolts, but it was Ven who didn't get the memo on Pyromancer. That time it was Barra on the left side. Phoenix, he was up further than his front line as that fight started to continue. Jake and Haddix took a little bit too much damage. Don't think Barra really read that situation as well as he could have.
One tower in mid. The Leviathans might still feel confident enough at stepping forward, especially with Rangyu, with Frenzy. You might be able to take this objective down quickly. Haddix is in between a few here, but we'll just take the stun and back off.
Good damage coming from Ven. I mean, he's in trouble if he gets jumped on, but if he's doing the jumping, then he's going to be in a good spot because he is just strong right now in the build. Big deal, though, for the Leviathans that 2 of their frontliners have Magi's now. Rangyu and Panatom both picking that up, neutering the ability for Fenrir to get in and pick them up pretty much for free. That's going to be a big deal in these engagements, but Rangyu hasn't been able to upgrade his starter item until right now, so that's big that he was able to go back and do that because that would have been a big difference in effective tankiness between him and Jake.
Lasbra has upgraded his starter item, Hidden Blade, for this Osiris. Zapman left on. Lots of damage into the Leviathan's Hunter, and the Ragnarok is in there as well. Zap has to use his ult to disengage, but Venenu's been left alone in the backline. Finally, Zap goes down, but it's carry for carry, and Shinto is still alive, and he's still swinging, and Barracuda is down for the Olympus Bolts. Jump back in from Lasbra, and Shinto lives on, will dash away, and he will survive, but not before Lasbra re-engages. It's the double kill for the Osiris, but Haddock's left alone being burned away by Wrong Yu.
Still all frontline left, 3 versus 3. This is the big boys playing pickup basketball now, but it looks like the Leviathans are in good shape. Yarkor doing great work until finally they end up backing up.
Wow, Haddock's Laz both on red HP, Jake on yellow, Wrong Yu a little bit healthier. But it's only the front lines left alive. That's their dream, isn't it? Look,
yes.
we got no hunters to deal with. We got no mid laners to deal with.
Right off the beginning, but then Jake takes a little bit too much damage, continues to go in instead of backing up. But they capitalize on Ven's relics being down. Barra gets caught in a bad position. But look at the relic situation now for the Bolts. They came into that fight without him. Now their backline has them, whereas Shinto does not, and Zatman only has Aegis.
So with that, you won't see the Fire Giant contested. Another 45 seconds, it would have been enhanced, but this one, good old-fashioned normal, in case one of these fights starts to roll on out. But the call is going to be a 4-1 split from the Olympus Bolts. They're going to send Lasbra to the opposite side of the map, effectively taking Panatom out of the fight, unless he chooses to rotate back in. But just waiting for that wave to catch up before the siege begins.
I don't like the patience from the Bolts here, though. Not only are you wasting time on your FG, but now all the relics for Shinto and Zap are back up. That was a good window that I think they could have done a better job abusing, and it's not like Persephone's wave clear is getting any worse anytime soon.
Lasbra and Panatom go toe-to-toe just a bit, but Lasbra doesn't take all that much damage. So the Olympus Bolts continue to be patient. There's plenty of wave clear here for the Leviathans to keep these waves out and at bay. There are 2 minutes left on this FG buff, so plenty of time for the Bolts, but if the Leviathans are able to keep up this type of defensive pace, then I'm sure they'll be happy with the way that things are. Haddock's, Awesome Jake, those are the two you got to watch out for, and those are the two that go in. At the drop of a hat, the Olympus Bolts take down the left side Phoenix. Barracuda dodges out the grasp of death. The Vines catch them, but they're able to make quick work, and the Olympus Bolts, they find their time to strike, and they get a left Phoenix.
Really well done by the Bolts. Just not done waiting around. We got double blink on our front line. Historically been a no-no in Smite because you need pen in order for your Chin's proc to deal more damage, because that is affected by penetration. Not too bad, though.
What does Zap want to do here?
Nice
He wants it all in. A great stun from Haddock's. Will clip that engage. A stun does connect onto the Cerberus, and a second stun also connects onto the Cerberus, but watch out. Awesome Jake is around the backside and leaps exchange. We got the jump squad here in game 2, and all of them get used there.
Whoa!
Into the back. Haddock's gets a whole lot, but only one gets pulled back through. Yarkor in the Ragnarok, but doesn't take nearly any damage. Instead, Awesome Jake is the one worse for wear. Lasbra, you're all alone in the back, sends out a couple tethers, gets disarmed by Wrong Yu, but will use the beads and will back off. Fire minions make their way into the Leviathan's base. That was one final chance, maybe, to find a fight outside of this FG pit, because the enhanced FG is now spawning.
Threaten you at all. You just send your Chernabog, let him go clear it. We're chilling, but because he doesn't have the ultimate, he can't join in on this.
Zatman is just going to do the purple buff here, realizing it's going to take a little bit of time to get in there. Veninu actually has to flicker away here. Lasbra again around the backside, and there is no ADC damage for the Leviathans to counter this attack. Yarkor gets pulled back in by Awesome Jake, and that leaves Lasbra and Haddock's alone with the backline of the Atlantis Leviathans. It's a leap on for it all, but it's a big double pullback through. Veninu finally in the kill column as Yarkor goes down.
Zap's left alone on an island. Aegis is solid, and he does get into the wall, but I can't imagine that's enough time. No, it's a double for Ven.
Ven's got a double. Barracuda's got one as well. Shinto is left all alone, and I hear game 3 calling Venenu. He's chosen his time to go off well. It's a triple kill for the Merlin, and it's Wrong Yu against the world when the world's going to win this one. The Olympus Bolts send us to 3.
Impressive turnaround from them. I mean, they were just able to win one fight and then keep the game in their favor really from that moment on. Just felt like the Leviathans they just couldn't group. They couldn't get together at any point. In that last fight that they forced near mid.
Hey, we got some pressure across the board for it, but that's when the Bolts finally bit back.
It was really this. Clean 5 picks for the Leviathans, but the goal, as you just mentioned, evened out entirely. Olympus Bolts, though, able to establish the first real lead off the back of that team fight. Granted, 3K gold, 22 minutes in, not really that big of a deal. However, the picks that transpired after the fact were the real issue here. And while this, I think Aggro had probably one of the best calls ever. I'm not gonna lie, J-Mac. This really was just like watching the big boys play basketball, because we just saw the front line smashing away at each other, and nobody knew what they were doing. Everybody's just trying to run it down, but obviously they're all tanks, so they're not gonna really deal that much damage to each other. And It was definitely entertaining, but that last little engagement, I felt so bad for Zatman because I feel like any hunter has definitely been there. You want to participate in the fight. You were busy. The team sent you to go clear out the fire minion waves. Turnabog, though, didn't have his ultimate available. By the time he starts getting into position to contest, it's already too little too late, and then he's just left alone. I don't know what the comms were like, obviously, between these two teams. I could hear them going crazy in the boots, for sure, but that's not a guarantee that Zetman really had the heads up that, hey, they're all in the jungle exactly where you're headed.
And all throughout that early stage of the game, it was constantly the Leviathans beating down Venenu, Jake, and Barracuda, making sure to shut up until this point. You start out going with the more meta stuff. Make sure you ban away XYZ because they're just the good gods. But now we start getting to the more intricate moments of the set where now do you start putting some more of these targeted bans. We saw it in game number 2 where they banned an Artio and they banned a Terra, making sure that that was what they established as the problem factor for Leviathans in game number 1. Now as we get towards game 3, we may see some more of those shifts in the picks and bans. But so far, it's tried and true, side and steady. We're going to be seeing the Artemis and the Tiamat taken away.
Leviathans, they didn't really have much of a choice in game 2. Barracuda able to snag up that Artemis largely because of the fact that Leviathans being in that second pick position had to prioritize elsewhere. But now that they're in the driver's seat, they're going to have no problems whatsoever just continuing to channel in on individual bans. Giannis also going to be taken away from Venenu, and it's up to the Bulls to decide whether they want to look to reban that Artio like they did in game 2 and possibly even banning away that Raijin as well. Both of those feeling at necessities, but you can't forget about the Rongyu Yamoja. And Bolts, I think, going to have a tough decision to make here for that third pick selection.
There's going to be a lot of discussion between coach and players for here what they want to do for these bans. What is the most important factor for them? Right now, it's just a lot of the same stuff that we've been seeing, making sure Rongyu can't get Yamoja because, well, Yamoja's kind of crazy. Jake is also good with Yamoja, but because they're not first pick, the Leviathans would almost instantly snap block that one, making sure they can't give it to Jake. See Gilgamesh as the next ban for Leviathans, and rightfully so. He has been a major thorn in everybody's side between that Winds of Shamash and between just the CC that he's able to provide with that drop kick. Final ban goes to the Bolts, and this is a big one for them. They're going to take the Terra, which leaves a lot of things open, namely that Raijin that Shinto has run an undefeated streak with.
Fair play, though, to the Bolts, because if Shinto does choose to prioritize that Raijin, Fafnir's up for grabs, Osiris is up for grabs, and it might be more worthwhile for the Leviathans, based on how games 1 and 2 have gone so far, for them to maybe just solidify that Osiris pick for themselves here, J-Mac, because if they leave that priority open for the Bolts, you could expect that the response is going to be swift and immediate, and sure enough, Leviathans, they're not going to take their chances. They want that Osiris more than anything else in this game, and now Bolts, they can decide if they want to take the Raijin, but again, I'm not even it wasn't a necessary evil, I don't think, but at the same time, if they don't take it, you have to imagine that it'll be the response for second and third grabs out of the Leviathans. Fafnir could come into the mix now for the Bullets, given the fact that that's something that Jake really loves. Terra being banned away as well as the Yamoja means that Cerberus and Fafnir are probably some of the better frontlining options left open, and sure enough, it's the Faffy.
Yeah, Cerberus, Fafnir, even Ymir could be thrown up for discussion, though he's kind of fallen to the wayside between both these players as the Fafnir has been the primary target for. With the Osiris locked in by Leviathans, it will be Raijin Fafnir for the Bolts, and that leaves a lot back open for the Leviathans to try and take away from, and they're going to make sure not only to strip the Osiris away from the Bolts, but away from Lasbra, but taking extra shot at Lasbra here and making sure to take the Circuit away from him so he doesn't have that option available in the jungle. One more pick for the Leviathan before the banning phase for themselves. They're going to pick up Merlin to take another god away. Now Venenu has to dig a little bit for, or no, Venenu has the Raijin, doesn't matter, he's already got it there. So mid lane picks already locked in here for the Leviathan.
Yeah, but it was pressure on the Leviathans in terms of wanting to get a priority pick for Shinto, because if they didn't take this Merlin early on, you could definitely expect it to happen banned away. And I think they could also work as a persuasion factor to keep that Bolts front line from wanting to double down entirely into the Guardian pool just because of the fact that Merlin, excellent god for shredding through tanks. Fenrir, though, going to be the run back for the time being. However, not necessarily guaranteed to be for Awesome Jake. There's a chance that this could be intended for Lasbra, and I think the main advantage that the Bolts have going into this fourth Fizz ban period, J-Mac, is that ambiguity, because Leviathans, they feel a little bit, I don't want to say cornered, but definitely thinking that, hey, this Fenrir not necessarily guaranteed to be the last piece of front line, and just in case, we're going to start stripping away those frontlining options, so Haddix won't be able to run back to Cerberus this time.
And I think the Cerberus is kind of that necessary evil you do need to just ban outright. He has been a rising god in the last few weeks. A lot of that thanks to the help of Hell coming back in, so players have been going towards the Cerberus. But then players just kind of realizing, hey, Cerberus is kind of good. He's been doing really well. Teams have been able to get some big performances with this solo lane god. Has some flexibility for support roles, so you can't just immediately go, yeah, that's solo lane Cerberus, no big deal for it. So taking that one off the table, still one more ban available for Leviathans. They'll choose to take the Odin away that somehow made it all the way through to the second banning phase. Meanwhile, the Bolts respond with taking another shot at Zapman to take the Heimdall away and banning a Sobek instead.
Something I'm keeping in mind, though, Izanami, Chernobog, Rom. They're all options, but as far as Zapman is concerned, I feel as though he's kind of deterred away from those dash escape-oriented hunters like the Rom, and not only that, but Barracuda, he's going to take that Chernobog for himself, adding some of that global utility on board for the rest of this Bolt's composition, not to mention the attack speed steroid should pair nicely with that Fafnir Coerce, and just the ultimate dive capability, I believe, alongside of that range from the Taiko drums that Benenu's going to have with the Raijin. And if Zapman chooses to respond with a dash-based god, maybe feeling as though, hey, I can't allow Bear to be the only impactful global member here. I like the idea behind the Apollo. I'm concerned with how it fares against this Fenrir Fafnir.
Does have a little bit of global presence, but has to expend his only form of really good CC with that Mez to try and strip this Fenrir away or try and keep this Fafnir off their tail. The Leviathans will go back to the RDO that worked so well for them in Game 1, making sure to give that one back over to... Well, actually, no. It's not going to be going over to Harkar. Unless this is somehow a Circuit support going the way for Wrong Yu, so this RDO may actually be going into Wrong Yu's hands this time around because the Osiris and the Circuit have already been locked in. The Olympus Bolts is a final pick. They make their way over to Bologna as
in the first round. If the Leviathans win, their hopes are still alive for a top 2 spot in the Phase 2 playoffs, which means they don't have to play one of these teams in the first round. So, still very important, despite these teams all having made the Phase 2 playoffs, and with how important this game is, the Leviathans go with something new here, Aggro. Wrong you on the Circuit support.
Definitely a different look, and you know, the very beginning of last year, when this team joins up, you're thinking, okay, Wrongyu only can play these few gods, and you know, Hercules was really meta, but you're not seeing that out of him very much. He really added gods like that to his god pool effectively, and so if he can do that, I'm a believer in this Circuit support. I don't know how good this is as a pick in general right now, but I don't think that it's going to necessarily be a problem for the Leviathans. Just a matter of effectiveness on execution, not, you know, whether or not he's comfortable or wrong. Jake in Game 1, wrong you in Game 2. We'll see if that can change here for the Leviathans and break that pattern.
Collapse in. Awesome Jake jumps on to Panatom, who has Blink. He does not have beads. That means Brutalize closes the gap, and there's a Thunder Crash in, and Barracuda gets first blood in Game 3 for the Olympus Bolts. Feels like these hunters, in some way, shape, or form, have been involved in one of the first couple of kills in each of these matchups. And now it's the Chernobog, and he likes Chernakuda, by the way. I asked him about that, and he officially cast his vote for Chernakuda. And Chernakuda's got first blood.
I'm going to be honest, I don't remember which side of the coin I was on, but immediately I just want to be contrarian to Barra and say I like Barabog.
Barabog, good.
So that's
what
I'm going to go with. Yeah.
But how can you disagree? I mean, the man himself says Chernakuda,
Look,
right?
if you've listened to our podcast at all, which you should, you know his opinions.
Unfortunately, the Chernakuda is in some danger here. Panatom on a gank to the left side of the map. If Barracuda plays it well, but not well enough. Panatom has the ability to close that gap, and close that gap he does. And now it's a bit of an equating kill maybe for the duo lane here for the Leviathans. That'll keep things relevant for Wrong Yu and Zap.
And how about Wrong Yu going? Yeah, I play Circuit, by the way, hitting the Blink double Cobra's Kiss, the flashiest play you can make on a pick like this, save for maybe booshing a minion, but you know, we don't talk about that.
Wow, invades happening all over the place. Yarkor kind of 2v1ing here as Lasbra and Haddix have to turn and run the opposite way. There's still a lot of damage here for Yarkor once those cooldowns are up, but luckily the leap cooldown from Lasbra comes up a little bit quicker, and the Brutalize there to close that gap. Panatom is on the left side of the map as well. There's a blue buff respawning for the Olympus Bolts, and that likely means a blue buff invade to answer the invade that the Olympus Bolts just put up. So not all is lost yet, unless Haddix goes down. This is going to be brutal. Stun, not followed up on by Panatom. And a slow blue buff invade is actually going to get abandoned. Maybe not.
Had to use
Yes,
the
it will.
beads. Yeah, they do. Okay, now we're going back to it. Yarkor's like, dog, I lost my blue. I'm Artio. I really want that. It matters quite a bit for a stand switcher like her. Horrific is an interesting idea, but I think it's great up against Artio, who is her dash faster than it used to be, but once it gets Horrific, it won't feel that way.
Zapman doing his own purple, doing it somewhat slowly though. Jake actually drops Horrific here. See what we can get out of Zapman, and the ult is the answer. I think Zap had to use it. Yarkor's continuing to put pressure on the right side of the map for good reason. Two of his teammates are close by. Haddix is here around the blue buff. Remember, Barracuda can ult into these fights. Zapman used his ult to disengage just a moment ago.
Right. The time once he does get there for the Apollo. So certainly a trade-off. They both have strengths and weaknesses.
It's a grouping around the Greater Scorpion for the Chernobog this time and the rest of the Olympus Bolts. That one will get taken down quietly. Zapman is on a ward here. Could be a wrap around the backside by Lazarus. It's a stun onto Zapman. Beads will save the root. Brutalize gets used, but the leap is on the other end to close that gap. And Zapman just a bit overextended. Obviously didn't realize he was on a ward. And now the Olympus Bolts have gotten their second kill of the game.
Because he does not have the safety of a god like Chernobog. Their dash is very different.
Longyu is stealthed up here. And he's going to blink on Venenu, who immediately uses the beads. If that's me, I'm fumbling every button I press there if I'm Venenu, and I die almost certainly. But you admire the thought from Longyu. You blink through, and you get the beads out of the mid laner. But the rest of the Leviathans now are going to group here on the right-hand side yet again, continuing to put pressure on this blue buff. Haddix has not felt comfortable in this lane. When your blue buffs are getting invaded, it's probably going to be hard to do so. Jump in from Lasbra, though. There is some peel from Shinto in the mid lane. Ragnarok is used. Barracuda ults to this side of the map yet again. Big stun. You wonder if he wants a kill this time. Stun onto Lasbra. Horrific Emblem gets dropped by Awesome Jake, and he transforms as well. First kill in the fight goes to the Leviathans, but immediately answered back by Haddix and the Olympus Bolts. So blue buff plus kill. And the Olympus Bolts at least get one. Answer immediately traded out for Gold Fury, but not quick enough are the Olympus Bolts. Maybe now, though, with Awesome Jake by the Gold Fury. Instead, eyes turn towards the mid lane. Lasbra goes golden, but there is no pullback. Instead, Awesome Jake transforms around this Gold Fury. Zapman is here. Rongyu is rotating in from the mid lane as well. This is not going down all that quickly. Now, a little bit faster, though, as the Bolts have turned all of the damage towards it. Venenu sends the Taiko drums right on through, and that'll get some damage on the backline as well as secure the Fury, and you're going to trade out Awesome Jake in the meantime. Maybe if you're the Bolts, that's okay.
That one was intense. Composition that can do that to you again. The mobility on their side, the Circuit support, the Artio, the Apollo ultimate. I mean, they've got ways to track you down after an objective fight.
Objective started up by the Leviathans and not shied away from. The Olympus Bolts might have a chance to get on in here. Both ADCs on the left side of the map. Both ADCs can rotate into this fight, so no big advantage there, but Barracuda will be here a little bit quicker. Awesome Jake has taken more damage than maybe he bargained for, but this is one of the first times we actually see the objective fully get reset, but maybe behind Yarkor and some of that pressure, we could see a reinitiation, and there is. On to Awesome Jake, who uses the transformation. Is that enough to slow the Leviathans down? No chance, as Jake is sent into the backline. Frenzy gets used as his crying death wail there, and Shinto is able to pick up the kill, and that's all we've got on the right side of the map.
No real extra things expended either from the Leviathans.
For Barracuda, and Yarkor is getting way ahead of the game here. Spectral item.
And this is where you sell your tier 2 Shuriken.
Right, that's what I'm thinking.
And you hit him with the hard juke.
You go with something else. Right now, Barracuda's going to use that little bit of crit chance on the Oni Fury. In the back, Lasbra's jumped onto Zapman, who does have both actives. Ragnarok won't burn the beads. Yarkor is left alone here. Venenu's used his ult to get a lot of damage in there and finds the opening kill in this fight. Awesome Jake jumps back forward. A crit from Zapman melts the health bar just a little bit further. Barracuda dunks back down, and Panatom will use the ult that's come back off of cooldown. It looks like the Olympus Bolts have done enough to push the Leviathans back.
Shinto's still here, but no beads. Thing is, for the Bolts, they don't have any ultimates left in the tank as Jake has just expired, but they still did enough. And exactly as we expected, Dave. I mean, Oracle Vision is there, so you end up really starting to, every whip, it's like, all right, well, that's harder to engage now. And all right, that's harder to engage now. And that's going to continue as these team fights play out.
We've seen these blinks from Rongyu in the mid lane that have taken the beads away from Venenu, but as the game has slowed down, the beads have been able to come back up effectively on cooldown. So those have never really been under all that much pressure, despite Rongyu being able to take the beads pretty effectively there in the mid lane.
Whoa.
No way, right? I mean, this
No
is
way.
Zap and Rongyu. Lasbra is here. Rongyu and Zap will reset the FG. Barracuda ults on in, and suddenly the game ignites a little bit further. Ragnarok onto Rongyu, but Panatom putting pressure onto Barracuda makes things awkward for the ADC. It's an up-down from Haddix that'll stun down Yarkor before the beads make their way out. Venenu sends the Taiko drums right down Main Street, and they'll connect for a little bit of damage.
Zap's on his way back. He has that ultimate, and the Bolts are starting to
Come on,
group
baby,
up.
do it.
Is he going to go
Go,
old
baby,
school?
go! Dunk into the back line, and he'll do a flyby. They won't end up doing it again. I wanted him to do it. I think it's probably smart
wanted
that he
to do
didn't.
it.
He wanted to do it, and his team said, no, 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 no. We're not doing this. Despite some
Nice
health
stun.
bars, though, Shinto left alone. It's a jump in from Lasbra, but unfortunately, there's way too much damage, and Shinto gets leapt on and makes awesome Jake pay. Now, Lasbra's got to leave, but Shinto puts him in the dirt. It's a double kill for the Merlin, and suddenly this game is broken wide open. Could be another one here if Venenu gets dove.
Whoa!
The Leviathans might turn their eyes towards the FG, but
Okay.
Barracuda gets an easy one onto Shinto.
Okay, Shinto feeling it, man. He saw a lot of low health bars, and he already noticed he had a double kill, and I'll bet you he was thinking Penta about that fight, because we really just chased a little bit too deep for a lot of those kills. Overall, Yarkor was able to handle Ven really well in that fight, and that's a big deal. That's a big deal that your front line didn't get absolutely decimated right away. Ven's got some more flat pen now. He picked up a Divine Ruin in his 6-item slot. I think I would have preferred the Rod up to Hootie, but the anti-heal does feel good up against the other.
Is there an engage to be had here in the mid lane? There is a double stun. Awesome Jake sent a stun right back the other way. Rongyu has somehow found Venenu, who thunder crashes away. But look at the initiation onto the Raijin, who has to use Taiko drums, and that's pulled the Arkor right back in next to Barracuda, who's ulted into this fight as well. And we will take a deep breath as, well, what might be the most important fight of the game so far is heating up.
Yeah, unfortunately. Welcome back, Smite fans. I've got good news and I've got bad news. The bad news is that unfortunately that demo was unrecoverable for us and we cannot bring you the end of Game 3. But the good news is, if you're a Leviathans fan, that they won. We've got Rongyu standing by here with me to break it down. So Rongyu, the last thing we saw was that you went in onto Ven. He pops his ultimate. You got his, he has no beads. Barra lands right by him. Walk me through what happened right after that.
Okay, so Ryan dash, and I wait his dash, and he instantly ult, and I go back to my backline. And then I think Fafnir dies because he jumps, and then Bellona ults in our team as well, and they all dead. And then somebody's like, can we die, can we die, can we die? Because it was like a tier 2 tower, and was like, yeah, we can die. I was like 1 HP, but yeah, let's die, bro. It's okay. And then we just kill them all, and yeah, just run.
And end
all
the game from right there. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So as expected, Zapman wants to dive, and that ends up working out.
Yeah, he Apollo ult raging. He ages all his damage, and we kill him.
Perfect. Now, I did see Zap go in a little bit earlier when he came back after he got poked out. Was he like, boys, can I go in? Because he looked like he wanted it.
He was like, boys, I have full, just tell me. I was like,
Learned how to reel him in already, though. I
Yeah.
mean, it's a huge win for you guys. Unfortunately, we couldn't see it on broadcast, but how important was this win for you guys to keep that top 2 dream alive as your seed?
well, I don't like people with 100% win rate lens, so I just gotta get rid of it.
You're sick of seeing it.
Yeah.
You're sick of seeing it. Well, hopefully we'll be able to see some more from you guys. Congratulations on a big victory. Apologies we couldn't see your penta that you lied about.
Yeah.
You got a penta. We just forgot to mention that part. We're kidding, of course. Again, apologies for what happened. Frustrating for all of us, but congratulations on your victory, Rongyu. And with that, we're going to throw it over to the desk to break down the entirety of Game 3.
Performance, because LAN players will tell you time and time again, it's a totally different competitive environment, and for a reason. There's a lot of other little factors coming into play, and as far as I'm concerned, the Leviathans, there was one big one that was the absolute tiebreaker between these two teams, and it was just the simple fact of momentum. That was really all I saw nonstop from this Leviathans team in game number 3. You see one punch from the Bolts onto the Gold Fury, and then it's immediately the Leviathans answering back. They look for picks, they look for pushes, they look for siege, and all of that control, I think, just factoring in and kind of overwhelming the Bolts towards the end there. I think that Bolts, arguably, might have had a better composition, but when it came down to the execution, Leviathans were all over it.
And even as you see in this highlight, as we get closer towards that point of the game where we're unable to view third here, at 28 minutes, it was a 2,000 gold disparity. That's all that separated these two teams. But the gold wasn't the big thing for the Leviathans. They didn't care if that lead was 2,000 or 10,000. They had all that momentum swinging in from the earlier stages of the game. A lot of that thanks to Panatom and Shinto putting up some big damage and some big kills for Shinto, especially 23,500 damage from the Merlin. Something you can always be a little bit excited for is when your mid laner just gets to pop off and have such a, I don't want to call it a free, but just have a roaring good time in the mid lane. As affected by this game, Camelot Kings, because of their head-to-head, are currently sitting up ahead of the Bolts in the standings, and the Leviathans have pushed the Jade Dragons down a slot, and now they're the ones sitting at that 3rd seed.
And not only that, you have to remember Olympus Bolts, who they've got up next, is going to be the Valhalla Valkyrie. So this was definitely the set to take for the Leviathans because, like we just mentioned, they're going to keep their dreams alive one step further with their upcoming match.
Yeah, the Leviathans, not only do the Bolts have their match with the Valkyries, but the Leviathans have to play against the Scarabs for their next one. So both these top-end teams playing the teams that, well, they can't make the playoffs, but that doesn't mean that they're entirely out of it here. The Scarabs have been trying to kind of play a playoff ruiner here for anything else. So sure, we don't get to play in the playoffs, but maybe we can make it a little bit difficult for you as well. Our matchups tomorrow, Warriors and the Kings, and Olympus Bolts and the Valkyries will play off tomorrow, and then rounding out the weekend for Sunday, Leviathans and Scarabs, and the Jade Dragons and the Tartarus Titans. That's going to be a very hot mat to watch.